This morning, our lesson is entitled Legion. Now, the word legion may mean many things to you. Originally, it was a term used for a troop of Roman soldiers numbering about 6,000. In the story that we're studying this morning from Luke chapter 8, it makes reference to a demon-possessed man who identified himself as Legion. And so he was possessed not by one demon, but by perhaps thousands of demons. In fact, later on in the story, Jesus would cast the demon into a herd of 2,000 pigs. So we could say that by the best ability we have, this man was possessed by no less than 2,000 demons. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but I know that Jesus was dealing with vast numbers of demons in the story. And that is a very interesting detail and a very important detail. But I submit to you this morning that as we study Luke chapter 8, the legion of demons is not the most important legion that we find in the story. The real legion we're to concentrate upon, that really matters, that can be helpful to us as we study, is the legion of people that responded to this great miracle of casting out the demon of this poor man in the country of the Gadarenes. These were the people of the Gadarenes, which are the people of a place called the Gerasenes, a city southeast of the Sea of Galilee, a place in a province called the Decapolis, which means province of 10 cities. Largely Gentile in population. Jesus visited it on numerous occasions. We read that great crowds were coming out to him from the Gerasenes in Matthew chapter 4, verse 25. In Mark chapter 8 and in Matthew 15, we read that Jesus fed a multitude of 4,000 in the Gerasenes, not including women and children. And so this is a city having thousands of people who have been interested in Jesus. We could say it was a legion of people who responded to this miracle that happened out in the tombs of the Gerasenes on this occasion that we're reading about in Luke chapter 8. Crowds were important to Jesus then. Crowds are important to us today. We're concerned about the legions. We're concerned about numbers. We hear about numbers all the time in political polls. When I meet somebody and tell them I'm a preacher and they ask where, and probably the next question they'll ask is, how big is your church? And they want to know how many are here. And that's, for us, for some reason, the main identifying characteristic of churches sometimes is the attendance or the number of the membership. We want to know population statistics. We talk about numbers a lot with regard to social media and how many followers somebody has. And that defines them in our mind many times. We want to know about numbers, and we struggle with numbers. And some people struggle with popularity or being unpopular, and they wonder, does this define me? How should I respond to it? There's a lot of information about that in this story. And if we're not careful, we'll spend so much time on the fascinating aspects of the demon possession and the healing of the man and his transformation that we miss out on how Jesus dealt with the crowds, with the real legion here for our consideration, the people. And so we're going to look at that this morning, and we'll get to Jesus in a moment. But in the first place, I want to look at the herdsmen and the people. You'll note that they were witnesses to this whole event. And as Jesus deals with them, we read further from where Steve left off in verse 30. They identified themselves as legion. And in verse 31, they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. And a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Now note this, verse 34. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. And so the first encounter between people and someone else is between these herdsmen who witnessed this whole thing and the people in the city and in the country. They're the ones that brought the news of Jesus' marvelous act to the legion of people. And so I think we need to think about them for a moment. Now, they went out and they told these things. Luke doesn't tell us exactly what they said, but we can guess that they probably told them about this man who was in the tombs, and he cried out day and night, and he wore no clothing. He walked around naked, and how the people tried to chain him, and he would break the chains, and he'd cut himself, and he'd cry out, and he had this legion of demons. And they may have talked to the people about how the demons spoke to Jesus and even identified him and said to him, "Son of the Most High God, I beg you, do not torment me." If I were one of the herdsmen, I would have mentioned that little detail. It brings to mind what James said about the demons in James chapter 2, verse 19, that the demons believe and shudder. The demons know who Jesus Christ is. They know exactly who He is. They're from the spirit realm. They're very familiar with His identity, and they don't identify Him as some false prophet or someone who is not powerful, who's posing to be somebody He is not. They don't merely call Him a teacher or a prophet. What they call Him is Son of the Most High God, and they shudder in fear of Him, afraid that He would torment them. And maybe the herdsmen told the people about that. And I'm sure they told them what happened to their pigs, because there was a crowd of pigs there, and the demons begged Jesus not to cast them into the abyss. Now, what is that? We don't know for sure. It's been used in classical literature and in some cases the Bible with reference to Hades, the realm of the dead. They didn't want to go back to where they came from maybe, and asked Him to cast them into the pigs, which seemed senseless by the end of the story, because once they were cast into the pigs rushed headlong into the sea and were drowned. And so that's a very interesting detail in the story. Pigs, we know, were unclean to the Jews. This was a Gentile area. Was there some connection to demons and unclean animals? We don't know. That's never explained for us. Maybe it was just happenstance. But one thing we can be sure of is these herdsmen were none too pleased that they lost a flock. I don't think you call pigs a flock, but they lost a herd of pigs, 2,000 pigs, to this Jesus of Nazareth who cast the demons out. And they were perhaps upset about that. And maybe that's some of the things that they told the people in the city and in the country. And we don't really know for sure. That's just some things we can guess at. The people did come out, but they didn't come out for the right reason. As we'll see a little bit later as we look at them, they came out and they were suspicious and they were afraid. And so we can guess that the herdsmen didn't come out to give a good report about Jesus. They were concerned about their pocket and what was going to happen to their bank account after losing a herd of 2,000. They didn't talk a whole lot, we can guess, about the transformation that happened in the man who lived in the tombs and how when the people arrived, he was clothed and in his right mind. They dwelt more upon what it lost, which tells us something very important. What it tells us is there are a lot of bad witnesses out there, and there are a lot of victims of poor witnesses. And the herdsman in this example helps us think a lot about the poor witnesses in the world today. You can see them everywhere. You can see them in the headlines. You hear a lot about fake news, right? You can hear it in the gossip that goes around between friends and things that people say about one another that aren't true. You can see it all over social media. The people aren't very careful about what they share. They don't fact check things. They see something that aligns with their political stances or what they want or their prejudices, and they eagerly post it before they check it out, not thinking about how they're spreading things to maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of people. There are a lot of poor witnesses out there, which means there are a lot of victims of poor witnesses out there today. And it's very common. There are a lot of examples in the New Testament. For example, in John 16, verse 2, Jesus is preparing His disciples for a time when He would no longer be with them. And He says to them, "They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God." And Peter is also trying to help disciples of Jesus deal with poor witnesses, and there's not a whole lot of options for them. You can see how Peter tells them to deal with these poor witnesses in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 12. He says, "Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation." You can't do much else in the face of lies and gossip and rumors except behave the way you're supposed to behave and just hope your reputation will stand for itself. In another place, Peter says this in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15 and following, "In your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." We're confronted with poor witnesses like the herdsman, just as Jesus was in His day. And there are only a few options that we have to deal with them, but we must always maintain our honorable conduct and treat them with gentleness and respect, even when they tell lies about us and slander us. During the first century, there were all kinds of rumors that went around about the early Christians. For example, the early Christians would not hail Caesar as God, nor would they bow down to any of the Greek and Roman gods of mythology. They saw all of these as false gods, and they upheld only one God, the true and living God. And so one of the rumors about them was they didn't believe in God. If you can believe it, the early Christians were maligned as atheists. That was one of the lies that were told about them. They also, many of them, possessed spiritual gifts. They really could heal people. They really could speak in tongues or languages they had never studied before and understand languages they had never before studied. They had special knowledge that came to them miraculously. And there are many other things that they could do. They could pick up deadly serpents and not be harmed. And the rumors began to spread about them. And the rumors were not kind. They weren't what you would hope for. These people have the power of God. These people are somebody special that we should listen to, but rather they have black magic. Their powers come from the demonic world. These are the kinds of things that they would say about one another. They observed the Lord's Supper on the first day of every week, just like we have. And as we took the unleavened bread and the fruit of the vine, we reflected, I hope, upon the body and the blood of Jesus Christ, upon His death. And there is a sense in which we communed and partook of the body and blood of Jesus. But we know that these things we consumed were representations, symbols, emblems of Jesus' body and His blood, not the real thing. But if you hate Christians and you're talking to a group of people that have never met a Christian before, well, that's an opportunity for rumor, an opportunity to be a poor witness. And maybe you could call them cannibals and say that they were actually eating the body and the blood of their masters. And these kinds of rumors actually did spread about the early Christians. They were also accused of incestuous relationships because they called one another brother and sister. And there was no attempt to set the record straight. There was preconceived notions and prejudices. And there was a desire to tear them down instead of listen to the truth. And so the early Christians had to deal with the poor witnesses. They were victims of that today. And it's not unusual for rumors to circulate about us today as well. What do people say about the church who don't care anything about the church, the enemies of the cross? What do they say about us? You know the rumors. You know the poor witnesses. They're abusive. They're hateful. They're judgmental. They're uncaring. They're homophobic. They want to tear up homes. They hate people. They're isolated. You hear these things all the time. You see it in the news. You see it all over. Jesus said, you can expect that kind of thing. They hated me, and they're going to hate you. And most of the time, the culprit behind the rumors is a poor witness who hasn't experienced the transforming power of Jesus Christ. And these poor witnesses have a remarkable influence over what the crowds think, what the legion thinks. And we see it in the text of Luke chapter 8. We see the effect the herdsmen had over the people. We saw it in church history and some of the examples I just gave. We see it today, and that's the world we have to deal with. And Jesus is giving us an example in the text of how to deal with it. So let's go in the second place to Jesus and the people. Now look at Luke chapter 8, verse 35, and we'll start reading there where we left off. Then people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and he returned. This is an interesting reaction that maybe we didn't expect. Jesus heals a man. They've had trouble with this man for a long time. And he heals him. And the herdsmen go and tell them what happened, or a version of what happened. They're upset about their pigs, or they're afraid, or whatever. And then the people come, and what do? Embrace Jesus, invite him into their homes, ask him to teach them more? No, they ask him to leave. And so how does he respond to it? Well, before we get to that, let's ask why they responded the way they did. Well, first of all, perhaps they loved their peace more than they loved him. Jesus is disruptive. You know, if the real Jesus steps into your world, it's going to be different after he leaves than it was before he arrived. And a lot of people don't like that. Matthew chapter 10, he says, "Do not think that I've come to bring peace upon the world. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword." That doesn't mean that he doesn't bless peacemakers or he doesn't want peace. What it means is when Jesus steps into a sinful world, it's going to be a disruptive presence in that world. I don't know if you've caught the new show. It's on some streaming platform called The Chosen. And it's a show about Jesus, and there's some good things about it. And there's one scene in the show where Jesus is speaking with children. They're not quite sure to what to make of him, and they ask him if he's dangerous. And he says, "I'm dangerous to some people, but not to you." Is that true? I think Jesus was dangerous to a lot of people who had their power to protect, who had their interests, their pigs, their back pockets, their bank accounts to protect, their traditions to protect. Jesus was blowing all of that up, disrupting lives from one perspective. And so that may have been the problem that these people were having. Another possibility is that they loved their pigs more than they valued the soul of the man, or they valued Jesus. That's another possibility. You know, he had interrupted their income. And a lot of people don't like that about Jesus. He's asking me to give. He's asking me to make sacrifices. He's asking me to put the next world over the present world. How dare he do that? But the text tells us this, that they were seized with great fear. It may have been that they knew this man before who had been demon-possessed. And when they saw him clothed and in his right mind, they just didn't know how to process that. Who has that kind of power? to throw demons into a herd of pigs and transform a man's life in a moment? Who has that kind of power? And so they asked him to leave. Now, did your mom ever ask you this question? My mom's asked me this question. If everybody jumped off a cliff, would you follow them? Well, in this story, everybody's jumping off the cliff. They're wanting to follow the pigs off the cliff into the sea. So, is the crowd a good guide? That's the question. And the answer, we all know, it's what our mothers taught us, is that popularity is always a terrible guide. The majority may rule, but that doesn't mean the majority is ever right. Many times the majority is wrong. And the book of Proverbs notes how popularity is dangerous and how a lot of times it comes easily. It comes for reasons other than right or wrong. For example, in Proverbs chapter 14, verse 20, it talks about how wealth itself sometimes is the only reason why some people are popular. The poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich has many friends. And it says it again in chapter 19, verse 4. Wealth brings many new friends, but a poor man is deserted by his friend. In fact, the same person can in one instance have a lot of friends in his life because he has money, and in another instance have no friends in his life because he has no money. That same man can lose friends just based on how much money he has. And we have a parable about that called the parable of the prodigal son. Prodigal son gets his inheritance early, and while he has money, he has friends. What happens when the money runs out? All the friends run away. Nobody's there to help him. Popularity is that fickle. It's here today, gone tomorrow. I think it's interesting about fashion, its connection to popularity. A lot of times people wear clothes to get friends. But 20 years from now, those same clothes will drive people away from you, you know. It's just so meaningless, so empty, popularity. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend, singular, a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I think that's the best translation of that passage. Other translations are a little unclear about what he's saying, but there, in that translation, it's very clear that he's saying, in order to keep all those people around you singing your praises, you're going to have to make a lot of compromises, and your best part of you, your essence of who you are, may come to ruin. But every once in a while, you'll find a true friend who sticks closer than a brother. Don't search merely for popularity, because it can mislead you many, many times. What does the Lord say in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14? Enter by the narrow gate. For the gate is wide, the way is easy that leads to destruction, and many there are who enter it. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. If you follow the majority, you may be on the wrong path. Now, there's a very interesting part of this story. Jesus' plan to comply with the crowd's request. The legion comes out and they say, we want you to leave. And Jesus doesn't get defensive. He doesn't explain himself. He just says, okay, I'll go. And he goes. Is that the kind of behavior we expect from the Son of Man? I mean, John 3:16 says, God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting, eternal life. God gave His Son to the world when the world didn't ask for Him. Shouldn't the Son be confronting everybody who asks Him to leave and saying, now wait a minute, I think you've misunderstood me. But that's not what He does in this story. They ask Him to leave, and He turns around and He goes. Does it mean He's given up on them? He hasn't given up on them. He simply knows a more effective strategy for reaching them. That's why our lesson isn't over yet. We've talked about the herdsmen and the people. We talked about Jesus and the people. He's not done with them until we talk about the next part here. We talk about the man and the people. We don't know this man's name. We know it used to be Legion, but now he's just a man who used to be demon-possessed. Let's read verses 38 and 39. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, begged Jesus. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him. Jesus had a plan. It was to reach these people, to reach the real Legion through this man that he had helped. Now, I want you to notice several things about this man's engagement with the people. First of all, notice his obedience. He wanted to go with Jesus. Mark's account says that Jesus would not permit him to go. How inexplicable is that? We don't understand it. Do you think the man understood exactly what Jesus was doing? There are many other times when Jesus would walk by somebody who was almost a complete stranger and say to him, "Follow me." And sometimes they would and sometimes they wouldn't. Now you have a man saying, "I want to go with you," and Jesus says, "No, I need you to stay here." And the man complied with him. And then notice his attitude about it. Even though he had been begging Jesus a minute before to allow him to come, even though nobody did anything for him when he was in the tombs, he still obeyed Jesus' command. He was able to do that because he wasn't focused on the past and what the people had done to him and how they'd put him in chains and how nobody had been able to help him there. He was focused on what had just happened to him and his Lord Jesus, who asked him to stay. And so he had the right attitude. And then his message. This is so fascinating to me. Did you catch what happens so subtly in verse 39? Jesus said, "Return to your home," and he gives them a message. He says, "Declare how much God has done for you." And what did the man do? Then the man, Luke said, proclaimed throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him. In case you missed it, let me read that again. Jesus says, "Go throughout the city and declare what God has done for you." And the man goes out and he tells them what Jesus had done for him. He believed Jesus was God. And I believe he gave them the message Jesus intended him to give. He declared the deity of Christ. Look at his commitment also. He did it throughout the whole city. He missed no corner. Everybody heard what this man was saying. And the contacts, look at that as well. Who did he talk to? He could have followed Jesus into new territories that he'd never been before, and I'm sure that he would have done some good because he was a sincere man, and he was grateful to God for the changes that occurred in his life. But everybody outside his home would have just seen him as a stranger. They wouldn't have known his backstory. The one place in the world that knew his whole story was the Gerasenes. It was there that they knew about his family, his upbringing, the moment when mysteriously he turned dark, started doing strange things, developing supernatural abilities, and eventually became known as one demon-possessed who lived in the tombs, who ran around without any clothes on. And only in that place would they know that he had encountered a man named Jesus, and everything after that encounter was different than it was before that encounter, and how he had completely changed in a moment. They're the only ones that knew about the pigs. They were the only ones that knew about the chains. They were the only ones that knew about the transformation. And Jesus knew that he could do more good in that one place than in any other part of the world. And you know, that's true of a lot of us. There are a lot of ideas about how evangelism should be done. And one approach is to just make cold calls and contact people that don't know you and you don't know, to do it long distance or at arm's length. I think the most effective method, and the one that I see Jesus doing, is relational, where you develop a relationship with somebody, you reach to the people who know you, but they have to see that some transformation has taken place in your life. They have to see that you're not a hypocrite, that you're the real deal, or it's not going to work. It worked for this man because he had really been transformed. And so you see his effectiveness, because Mark says in Mark 5:20 that everyone marveled. And the last point, we notice that Jesus made the choice not to stay, but to comply with the Gerasenes' request that he should leave. And now we see him telling this man, you can't come with me. I need you to stay here and tell your neighbors, your family, your friends, I need you to tell them what had been done. And so he did. And it worked. It was effective. There are several reasons for this that I think are common sense. One is God wants the message to be delivered in broken human beings. We're jars of clay, earthen vessels. And that's the way the gospel is meant to be delivered. But also, I think people need to see the difference the gospel makes before they buy into it. And this man's life had been transformed. And so he was a very effective witness. Remember how poor of witnesses the herdsmen were. They go out to the people, the legion we should really care about, and they brought a bunch of angry people out, a mob that asked Jesus to leave. This man was transformed. He goes to the same group of people, and they marvel. We've got to have lives transformed by the gospel if we expect to reach the world. You know, I know it's a hard field out there. I know that the world rejects Christ. I know the world is reluctant to hear Scripture and believe the New Testament and believe in Jesus Christ. And believe things. It's secular out there. It's worldly. I realize that. I know this, though. The world is not going to buy what we're selling if we haven't bought it ourselves first. If it hasn't made a huge difference in our lives, why do we think the world's going to think it's going to make a difference in their life? We've got to be believers before we can make believers. That's just common sense, right? And if we don't do it, who will? So it starts with us. We've got to allow Jesus to change us before we can change others. Are we willing to do that? You know the old story, old legend about Jesus returning to heaven to the angels after his death, burial, and resurrection, telling them all that had gone on. And then they ask him, why are you up here? And he says, well, I left the gospel in the hands of a few disciples. It's up to them now. And you know how the angels ask, what if they fail? And Jesus' response, according to the story, I have no other plan. We're the plan. It's up to us. And it's fun to sit around and think about what a legion of demons would do to a man and how they possessed pigs and how the pigs ran headlong into the sea and drowned, and ask all these questions about the implications about what God thinks about animals and demons and all of those things, but that's not what this story is about. It's not about that legion. The story is about the legion in the world around us today. That's the legion that God cares about. Your friends and your neighbors that need to see that your life has been transformed so that their lives can be transformed. And so the first question is, has your life been transformed by Jesus? And the second question is, if not, are you ready to change today? We can help you. You're amongst people who will build you up and encourage you so that you can be transformed and become a catalyst in the lives of others. If you need any help with that this morning, we'd love to share more with you. Why not come now as we stand and as we sing.